Okay, so continuing from yesterday, Mishlei Chaf Ches Chesed and Emes Yitzru Melech V'Sad B'Chesed Kiso. Kindness and truth preserve or guard the king. And you can take the Mikros Gedolos if you want. And he supports. We said present tense, even though it says past tense there. He supports his throne with Chesed. So we asked questions, which were, what's the Chesed? What's the Emes? Obviously. Whose Chesed and Emes is this referring to? Yeah.
Sorry, so he asked to make the word thing full screen.
The word thing full screen. I don't like to do that because I like to be able to switch back and forth easily with the Al Torah and the other stuff. Yeah, sorry.
A week ago we didn't have that.
It's true. It's a good point. Bnei Israel learned that lesson many times in the Midbar, but it was a reasonable request though. Yeah. Okay. What is Chesed in the context? What is Emes? Whose Chesed and Emes is it referring to? Is it the king towards his people, or the people towards the king, or is it both? How do they protect the king? Why are they being portrayed as active and he's passive if he's the one who's doing it? Why does the king need protection? Protection from what? What is the king's throne as separate from the king? So the first part says the king is protected. The second one says his throne will be established. Are those just synonyms, or are they different things? What is Sa'ad? What does it mean to support or sustain, or however we translated it? Establish the throne, and who is doing it? Why are Chesed and Emes the protectors of the king, but only Chesed is the Sa'ad of the throne? It doesn't say Emes in the second part of the pasuk. And then who is the king? Is it just regular king? Is it king in capacity of ruler, king in capacity of judge, any leader, intellect, God? Okay. And then who's the audience? What are the practical implications? So quick review of yesterday, and then Ariel has an idea. Okay. So yesterday we said that we were trying to take the approach of Chesed and Emes protect the king if the people have Chesed and Emes. And we didn't exactly know what Chesed and Emes are, but we said that if the people have like good societal values, then basically they will kind of take care of themselves in many ways. And not only will that cause less trouble for the king, but that will allow the king to devote all of his time and resources to like bringing excess good into the kingdom instead of just trying to like get rid of the bad stuff, so it works out for everybody. This morning, as I was getting ready to go, I suddenly remembered somewhere in the Rambam's writings, he says Chesed refers to ethical perfection and Emes refers to intellectual perfection. If I tried to find that before Shir and I couldn't find it. So that would be good, because I think the last thing we were looking for in Shir was like, can we make these two not particular midos, but like all-encompassing perfections that the nation would have, So that Rambam would really help with that. Problem, which we didn't identify yesterday, is I think the problem is like, what's the practical advice? Like, if you're going to be a king, like, make sure you rule over a people who is like, all perfected. It almost seems like that's not in the king's control, and it's not even in an individual person's control. It's like, whether the populace is righteous or not is like dependent on them. Now, you could argue that the implication is he should basically like work to try to like, make that happen. Like we used an example of a CEO in a company, if the employees are liars and are like not good interpersonally, maybe he can try to foster a corporate culture where that is the case, and then that'll make his rule better. So that could be a practical implication, but that's just something that's like a little bit of a weakness in this interpretation. Okay, so that was a review from yesterday. Okay, you had an approach with Zach.
Yeah. So we want to say that it's not okay. So Emet is loyalty.
Yeah. Right, which we said is a possibility of translating it. Yeah.
Emet was loyalty, and what was the other? It's a good thing I wrote it out. So
yeah. And you can understand your own writing.
Actually, I can understand the last paragraph.
I tried to be down the cosmos.
I'm honest. I'm honest. Chesed equals behavior which is marked by acts of kindness.
Okay. As opposed to just the internal quality of kindness. I mean, it's specifically behavior.
Loyalty is experienced internally.
Okay.
If I'm being loyal to someone, he may not necessarily know I'm loyal.
Okay.
But chesed, behavior which is marked by acts of kindness, that is a reinforcement of the loyalty. Meaning it expresses the loyalty. You need both.
Okay.
And for instance, you can
and then are you learning the first half as the king to the people or the people to the king?
It's the people to first of all, it's the people meaning his close, the king's close. Who he worked with.
That's a possibility we didn't even mention yesterday, right?
Yeah, I was wondering why. I didn't want to, whatever, but like I just feel like it's like it needs to like the king practically cannot be with every single person in his kingdom.
Right.
It's just like almost impossible.
Yeah.
It's just but if it's people who he closely interacts with that helps his kingdom grow or his company grow or whatever, then there's more of more of a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know why none of us mentioned that yesterday. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah. In fact, that's how we interpreted the pasuk 2 pasukim ago, right? About the king scattering the wicked from his presence. We said, or I said, I don't know if we saw him meforshim who said this, but it's talking about the people who he's like relying on in his inner circle,
Right.
Yeah.
So with that framework, like the people is closest to work with, and the chesed is marked by acts of kindness, which is a reinforcement to loyalty. You could say that like the anybody, whether you're a king or a CEO or anybody, no matter how smart you are, no matter how much motivation you have, you need help.
Yeah.
You definitely need help because what you're doing, you're essentially in this world to change the world on some level, at some capacity. And you're here to make a huge influence, and you need all the help you get because there's only so much one individual can go, and you really do need the support of your people who you're working with to help you push you towards that mission in life. And the best support you can get is someone who's loyal to you and who's kind to you, because it kind of shows that loyalty. Because loyalty is it's extremely internal. It's not something you can show. But like if you have kindness, then kindness to the boss only reinforces his motivation or psychology or whatever you want to slap.
Keeps that symbiotic relationship going. Yeah.
All
right, so now the second half is the part that it was.
Yeah. So the second half of the pasuk is Zach mentioned, and I kind of do agree with him that like by definition, he is loyal to his people. Like that's just by definition, this is just who he is. Like he just needs to express his kindness to show appreciation for what they're doing, and they'll just naturally. If you're already saying that kindness is a reinforcement to loyalty, and he's expressing that kindness, then that's all you need for the people.
So I object to that for the same reason I objected to something similar yesterday. Is that if anything, the king is not necessarily going to be loyal to his people, and that's like the vast majority of kings and bosses in history are like out there for themselves. They're not loyal to the people. But we're just reviewing yesterday.
I'm going to talking about a king who's a chacham.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so when we did say you could do that, yeah.
So once you say that, like, I'm assuming he wants to do what's necessary for his kingdom and his company, and like he's already working with people who he cares about, and like I just have a very hard time believing that he doesn't have that natural loyalty already, based off of his.
Well, if he's a chacham,
that's my
okay. That is much more understandable than what you sent me in the text. That's good. It's a good idea.
Yeah, there was one. Yeah, we also wanted to point out that like you could have loyalty without kindness, meaning you could technically be loyal, but if you don't show any appreciation, any gratitude, or any kindness whatsoever, like from the king's perspective or the CEO's perspective, it won't be perceived that he's loyal.
Oh, okay, interesting. So
framework.
Okay, so I have actually, I'm gonna stop the recording for a second, just for being careful here. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, fine. So you have one without the other. Now, what about you can show your kindness, but ultimately you're like a spy. You're like espionage. Whatever. Like. So what can happen?
Wait. I lost this.
Okay, fine. Let's say you're not loyal.
Okay.
You're not loyal.
Okay.
But you show kindness.
Okay.
So if I'm saying.
And you're not saying the pasuk is talking about that case. You're saying that like.
Yeah,
that would be okay. Fine. That would be chesed without Emes.
Yeah, that is chesed without Emes.
And the you is the employee.
Let's say the you. You as an employee.
Yeah.
So then the king or the CEO of the company, he may perceive, in reality, he will perceive that he's loyal. Naturally, unless he really thinks into it and like, fine. But that's the point. Like the point is like because of his nature, he's not loyal. He will ultimately slip up and he will stumble and he will just fall. He will falter. And naturally, the king will see that in the future, and it may be perceived for the short term that he's loyal, but in reality, he will really fall.
So that's why you're saying you need the loyalty as the foundation, and then the chesed has to be the second level.
It's just a reinforcement to the loyalty.
Right. Okay, that's a good shot. Yeah, I like it. Okay, good. So now let's look at meforshim, and I right before shir, I just skimmed all the meforshim. No one says like we said. Okay, in the sense that no one that I saw says that Chesed and Emes are coming from anyone other than the king. They all learn it as this is something that the king should display towards other people. Okay, so that doesn't mean that we're for the first part. It doesn't mean that we're wrong. Okay, but I think that is the natural way to read it, in the sense that it seems like this is advice for the king. I do want to show you one thing really quickly though, and this is just to show you again how fast and loose you can play with the psukim. Okay, Sad Yagon says in 28, Hishmit b'kfela es ha'emes. It omits the repetition of the word truth in the second half. Kafi shedarcha lasos, because that's how it does it. Okay. Amar tzchila lehese lamane dahava b'kaspa b'archach amar bidin hese mane dahava. I think this is probably from like Daniel or something. Daniel, because that's in Aramaic. So in other words, it said in Daniel, it says it mentions vessels of silver and gold, and then later on in the pasuk it just says gold. V'lo hizkir kaspa, and it doesn't mention silver. So it says, it just is more concise, So what this does, even though you might not, Malvin would shoot Sad Yagon, because but what it allows you to do is, if we want to broaden this to say that Chesed and so he basically saying Chesed and Emes protect the king, and he sustains his throne with Chesed and Emes. Just know that is open to you as an interpretation. Okay, so I don't like that. I mean, would it be really that hard to just like add the word emes there, or like to say v'sad shnehem b'shnehem kiso? Like I don't know, whatever. But I just wanted to throw it out there to show you could read the pasuk that way. Okay, so let's do as many meforshim as we can, and they all kind of like circle around the same ideas. We'll start with the simplest, which is the Metzudas David. Okay, bottom right. So he says. Chesed the Emes, here I'll make it bigger. Chesed the Emes, asher yaseh melech, the kindness and truth that the king does, him shomrim oso, they protect him, ki bezeh merubim ohavav, because that increases his friends, his loved ones. Okay, v'shomrim nafsho, and they guard his soul. Yeah, so if the king does Chesed and Emes to people, then people will love the king and they will protect the king. So that's like what you're saying about the CEO, basically. He's not defining. What was that?
It's in reverse.
It's in reverse. What do you mean?
Meaning he's saying the king needs to display chesed and loyalty.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. All the meforshim that I saw said that. That these are, But it's interesting how he's dividing it, because he's saying the king. In other words, he still is accounting for the fact that the chesed and emes are depicted as protecting the king, because it's saying if the king treats his citizens or his people kindly and with truth, they will protect him. So it's as if the chesed and emes that he's doing is protecting him. Like your boss, right? Like your boss does chesed and emes to you, and you want, if there was some threat to your boss, you would of course step up to absolutely to defend him. Yeah.
I don't know if I could pull it from him. For sure.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll
if the first half is the king, you're explaining chesed and emes. How do they explain the second half?
Let's see what he says. V'sa'ad, and he supports b'chesed she'asa. That's just with a chesed. Tamach kisei malchuso la'amod al amdo. That what do you call it? Supports his throne, the throne of his kingship, to remain in its place. Now he doesn't explain that because he's Metzudas David and he gives very little, little commentary. But can we explain that? And what can we explain? Let's assume that he's saying specifically chesed. So what is supporting the throne? Why does the emes not play a role in supporting the throne? And what effect does the chesed have beyond like the the first half of the pasuk?
Can you translate the tamach?
Yeah, tamach is to support. so Tamach Kis Malchuso, the throne of his kingship is supported La'mod al Amdo, which literally means to stand in its place. Yeah,
that's simple.
oh, sorry. Yeah, Yaakov.
Am I understanding correctly? Like the first side, you're saying it's going to guard him personally. Like,
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Okay, good.
Now it's saying that it's going to guard his kingship.
Yes. Okay, good. I think that's what it's saying. So now, why is it that only the Chesed does that? And see here, we also, he didn't define Chesed and Emes for us, so that still remains for us to understand. Were you gonna say something, Ali?
Well, I'm just wondering if so the second half is saying the kingship in the sense that like the legacy or what will be passed down.
Is that what you were getting at also, Yaakov? The as opposed to there's the person of the king, and then there's the dynasty or like the kingship. No. Yeah, that's what I was. So I'll show you who else says that, and then we'll go back to Metzudas David. So Shadal, who, by the way, I learned over the summer, who is a descendant of Shadal? Fiorello LaGuardia.
Who?
LaGuardia,
Oh, yeah.
the mayor of New York. Yeah. I mean, not current mayor of New York, but one of New York's greatest mayors. The airport. You've heard of the airport?
LaGuardia. I hate that airport.
You've not heard of the airport? Yeah. Yeah. No one ever said he made a good airport, but yeah. So he's a direct descendant of the Shadal, which is interesting. Okay.
How do they know that?
It's a famous family, the Luzzatto family. Yeah. And I guess his mother was a Luzzatto and his father was Italian. So
How did you know? How did you find
I was
out?
watching the best New York documentary ever for the third time. Yeah, it's a good documentary. The Burns documentary. It's an 8-parter, but it's a good one. Okay. Chesed Emes. Shtei Hamidos. Chesed Emes. These two midos, truth, kindness and truth. Hahatava b'asos mishpat. So he defines it for us. He says Chesed is just benefiting people, like beneficence, and then Emes is doing justice. Shomros hamelach, they guard the king. Ha-chesed yo'il l'chonin kiso yoser mimidas hadin, but Chesed is beneficial for establishing his throne more than midas hadin. This is the I can't actually quote this, but who wrote about this kind of thing, famous for writing about this kind of thing, about like what's going to be better for the ruler? Machiavelli, right? So Machiavelli dealt with these questions of like, is it better for the king to be loved or feared? I think he says feared, right? I think so. Yeah, we have to see Machlokas Machiavelli and Shalom Hamelach. But then he says V'talmidi Yehuda Lutato. So my student Yehuda Lutato. Shadal always quotes his students. I guess this must be a relative. Mosif, he adds, Ki chesed moil gam achrei mos hamelach. He says that chesed will also benefit the king after the death of the king. V'hu savar, and he explained, meaning this Yehuda Lutato explained, Shishar kiso levanov, that the throne will remain for his descendants, for his offspring. Ki chesed she'asa ha'av hu siba shekol ha'am ye'ahavehu v'yihyu ne'emanim gam im yotech halatzav. That the chesed that the father did will be a cause for all of the people to love him, and v'yihyu ne'emanim gam im yotech halatzav, and the people will also be trustworthy to the descendants of the king. So he's trying to make a move like that, which I think is a good move, saying that so just to put two and two together, and if you were going somewhere else with the first half, then you can say, but Metzudas David, that while the king is alive, the chesed and emes that he does will make him friends, and those friends will directly protect the king himself. And then the chesed that he does will remain in the memory of the people, who will then be loyal to his offspring, because they saw that, like, they feel like they owe it to the king, but the king's not around anymore, so they owe it to like his descendants. Yeah. The dynasty. Yeah. So it'll help his dynasty. And that fits in with the word kisei, like the throne, Yeah. Could we just answer though, why? So why will the MS not do that? I guess with MS, you don't really feel a sense of debt as you do with chesed. Like if a king like rules with justice, it's not like the people feel like, oh, he was so just with us, we have to pay him back. But with chesed, you do feel like that. Like that's a natural human response. Yeah, justice, right. That's like a baseline for, of course, the king has to be just. If you were unjust, then we would have problems with him. But justice is not noticed in the same way. Yeah. So that's a good shot, right? Yeah. Yeah.
It also creates resentment. The guy who loses the court case,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I just realized, by the way, now that I don't make a lot of Mishlei memes, but hold on, I made a Metzudas David on a Mishlei meme. Yeah. This is how I view Metzudas David. He gives you like a little bit. He just gives you the littlest amount, and it's extremely satisfying. And he doesn't explain himself. He's the most concise commentary on Mishlei that does give you ideas, and I think this really shows it. He basically like just pushed us in the right direction, but didn't actually spell out the ideas like the other meforshim do. So that's why he's in my top 3. He was it's actually, first of all, it was 2 people. It was his father started writing it, Rabbi something Altshuler, and then his father died and his son completed it. And he was in the 1800s, like very, very recent. But he writes like a Rishon. He's like, yeah, Isaac?
I said, what was the mean?
Oh, sorry. I'll send it to you afterwards. I thought I was sharing it. I guess I'm not sharing the whole screen. Oh, have I not been sharing the whole screen this whole time? Or was I earlier? All right, so let me share the whole screen. All right. Okay. Next, let's do the Rabbeinu Yonah, which I have not worked on, but I read. Okay. Chesed and Emes, left column, middle-ish. Yeah. Chesed and Emes Yitzru Melech v'Sad b'Chesed Kiso. Kasher Yaseh Chesed im Anashav. When he does Chesed with his people, I assume that's his citizens. Gam Yanche Osam b'derech Emes, and he also guides them in the way of truth. Okay. Hasn't defined anything yet. Ki Yishmor Osam min ha'ivul. Okay, so he protects them from injustice and he judges them with a judgment of truth and righteousness. So it sounds like a double role. Basically, he is a king of justice, both in terms of how he relates to them and how he judges them. So the chesed and the emes will be like a wall that protects him from all of his enemies. Okay, so far not super different from the Metzudas David, other than the fact that he's including the king's role as judge, which the Metzudas David didn't really comment on. Okay, fine. B'chesed kiso gemilus chasadim min hadvarim she'ein lahem shir kasher amru zal. So gemilus chasadim have no measure, right? That's we say in the morning that it's there's no shir, like Chazal say. Al kain amar, therefore it says lefi rov hachesed shiaseh timshach malchuso lazaro achrav. Oh, that's very interesting. So it's saying that in proportion to the abundance of chesed that he does, his malchus will extend to his offspring after him. Meaning the more chesed you do, the more assured your malchus is going to be after you. Ki hanachalas malchus. So that doesn't make any sense with the hey though. What? I guess, is that a legitimate conjugation? Hanchalas, I've just never heard of that. Hanchalas malchus lazaro yikar kiso. Okay, we get the point though. His the bestowing of his kingship to his offspring is called kiso. V'chein ksiv al kisei David v'al mamlachto. V'nemar ubenisi LaDavid l'dor dor v'dor kisach hasela. V'chein matanu ki timshach malchus hamelech lazaro lefi hachesed shnemar v'echrasa lechem bris olam chaste David hanemani. Okay. So how does that work? He's saying basically that in accordance with the chesed that the king does, then his malchus will extend. I mean, that's clearly related to what we were saying from the Shadal.
Pretty similar.
Yeah, but he's adding the idea of proportionality. Like the more you do, the better it's going to be. I mean,
the greater that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I feel like that is how chesed works, right? Like if someone, let's just on an interpersonal level, like let's say like someone, like pays off $100, or let's say paying off debt. Let's say he gives you $100, right? So you're going to feel indebted to him to a certain extent. But then at a certain point, then that like you're going to be like, okay, I've paid it back already. But let's say the guy like gives you $1 million. It's going to take a lot longer for you to do anything that like turns against him, you know? So like, yeah, exactly. So like I can see there being a reasoning in that. And it's interesting, by the way, that that what happens if the king, there's 3 possibilities for how the king's offspring are going to handle their malchus, right? So let's say the father had a lot of chesed and now you have a son. Okay, so either the son is as righteous as the father, or he's wicked, or he's like somewhere in between, you know? So if he's righteous, then I feel like the chesed that the father did is going to be like even supercharged, because they're going to be like, oh, this family is great, and like we owe it to this family, you know? If the son is like somewhere in the middle or neutral, then you'll have this reciprocal gratitude phenomenon that like there'll be a certain momentum that's carried forward by the father's chesed, you know? And like, as long as the son's not disrupting it, then they'll like default to relating to the son like they relate to the father, you know? Like from what I understand, I don't know if any of you have parents who talked about this, but remember back in the beginning of the pandemic when everyone loved Cuomo, right? Yeah, so I think from what I understand, a lot of the love for Cuomo came from love for his father, who apparently was like this great, the great politician that everyone loved. And it's funny because like the father was great and the son was perceived as great. And then like bad stuff started coming up and then the tide turned, so like that's an example of like a middle case, where like the goodwill of the father bolstered that of the son and kept the dynasty going, but then it ran out at a certain point and was counteracted by his own activities. And in a case where like the son is wicked, the chesed of the father will persuade the people to give the son a chance, but then the son can quickly like undermine all that goodwill that the father did,
It's a dynasty fall, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yep. So that's not substantially different from what we got out of the Metzudas David, but he just added the idea of proportionality.
I'm just trying, how does everyone read it's the king giving it to them?
So I think because the pasuk doesn't say who's doing the chesed, that's number one. Number two, it's a genre of Mishlei pasukim about teaching a king how to behave. Like that's a very, very common pasuk, whereas teaching the people how to behave towards the king as a collective is not such a big thing. Three is, even though I think your way is good about its advice to the advisors, the second half definitely seems to be about the king.
Well, the practical application for me would be for the king,
Right, that's true also, right, yeah. So I think it's just like the pasuk suggests that it's for the king, even though it doesn't explicitly say it. Okay, do you want to do one where the king is the intellect, just for kicks? Or do you want to do another pshat one? Or do you want to do both? Should we do both, Meiri? Okay, so the Meiri doesn't explain much in the pshat, but he says, Lefi on the right column, Lefi mash pirashnu ba'achrona b'pasuk shelafanav. According to what we explained at the end in the pasuk before this, what was that? Pasuk before this was, hold on, let me just go back. Yeah, the Nerashem thing. I just don't remember what the Meiri said. The Meiri at the end of do we read the Meiri in the end of the previous one? I can't remember. Where's the Meiri? Oh, there's the long Meiri. Okay, so at the end. Oh, so this is the Nerashem Nishmas Adam. What was it? Pasuk Nerashem Nishmas Adam. I gotta read the pasuk. Hold on. Yeah, Nerashem Nishmas Adam v'choves kol hadrei vatan. The lamp of Hashem is the soul of man. It searches all the innermost chambers of the belly. So the Meiri at the end. Let's just read that. I don't think we read it last time. Left column. V'yesh meforshim also derech nigleh. Inin hamelach hanevchar. Okay, so you can explain that pasuk about a good king or the chosen king, choice king. Shamuchuvan bo lios maskil. That it's telling him he has to be intelligent. So what he's doing, just explain where he's getting this from. Pasuk 26 was about the king, and pasuk 28 is about the king. So he's saying this pasuk about the ner could also be about the king. Okay, it's telling him they should be intelligent. Vieda lishpot es ha'am mishpat, and he should know to judge the people with a righteous judgment. But Adam, Romez al hamuvchar shebemin, and when it says Adam, nishmas Adam, that's talking about the best specimen of the species. Ratzal Mahamelach, that's the king. V'amar shesichlo hu ner Hashem, and it's saying that the king's intellect is the lamp of Hashem. Shechofes chadrei vaten, that searches out the chambers of the beten. Klomar shemakir ha'emes b'li edus l'rov sichlo. Oh, I mentioned this about Mashiach, that Mashiach is described as judging people by the aroma of justice or the aroma of truth. That it means he's doing it. He's giving you a correct judgment without testimony due to the abundance of his intellect. So he's got such a finely tuned intellect that he could like read people very well. Okay, which the king is entitled to do in the Jewish system, right? Is you could either take the people to the Sanhedrin or you could take them to the king. Sanhedrin uses all the procedures of Sanhedrin, but the king can just pronounce a judgment. Okay, obviously in America we don't do that. The whole davar lo yichad milfanav, and nothing is hidden from him. V'hu k'inyan kesem al sifsei melech b'mishpat lo yimal piv. As it says that in a earlier pasuk, like the lips of a king are like a charm, like a magic charm. In mishpat, his mouth will not lie. So it's talking about a king with a finely tuned intellect that can like read people very well and like pronounce judgment without any evidence. Okay, like a real Sherlock Holmes type thing. Okay, so given that. And by the way, this is also true for like, CEOs and other stuff. Like there are people who are just very, very good at reading other people, and like they can make really good decisions that way. in management situations. Hold on, I gotta just stop the recording for 1 second. So now the Meiri picks up on where he left off. He says, on our pasuk, according to what we explained at the end of the last pasuk, Amar Hena says here, Chesed and Emes, Tuv Pu'ulosav V'yosher Levavo, goodness of actions and uprightness of heart. So again, mutually exclusive and comprehensive. Chesed is doing good acts, and then Emes is the internal values. Similar to the distinction you're making, but he's extending it to all good action and all good internal qualities, not just loyalty. Yitzruhu mechato b'mishpatav. So those things will guard him from sinning in his judgments. So in other words, he's saying that it's not just a matter of intellect that produces the result in the previous pasuk. He also has to have good internal values and good actions. And through the uprightness of his judgments, his throne will be established. So this is just spelling out the benefit of the previous pasuk. Okay, but now let's do the intellect interpretation, I think. Let's see. Okay, derech nistar, okay, esoteric meaning. Okay, go into esoteric mode. Chesed and Emes, Romez al shleimus hamidos. So Chesed and Emes is perfection of midos. And like I mentioned before, the Rambam, I believe he says Chesed is perfection of ethical midos, and Emes is perfection of intellectual midos. I think he says in Shemona Prakim, I just couldn't find it. It's really annoying me. The Emes, who Romez al mitzua hadrachim shehu hayosher. So sorry, I skipped a step. Melech is the seichel. Okay, Melech is the intellect. The Emes who Romez al mitzua hadrachim shehu hayosher. Emes means the middle path, which is uprightness, like the Rambam's middle path. And I know he means the Rambam's middle path because he quotes it a lot. The Chesed, and Chesed is linatia me'at el hakateh ha'achron. Okay, Chesed is the Rambam's thing of inclining a little bit to one of the extremes. Okay, so those who listened to the Rambam Bakiyos last year, we spent like weeks on this. That the Rambam, the summary of the system is Rambam holds that in any midah there's two extremes, and there's a middle path. So easiest example is being a spendthrift, where any money you get, you immediately spend it on stuff. And then being a miser, which is you can't bring yourself to spend any money. And then in the middle is frugality, is you can control your spending and spend when it's necessary and save when it's necessary. So that's the middle path, and the Meiri is saying that's Emes. Okay, the Rambam calls that Chacham. But then Chesed is you incline a little bit towards one extreme, and you're always inclining a little bit towards one extreme. And the Rambam calls that being a Chassid. And the way we explained it is, of any of the midos, you want to be in the middle, because the middle means that you're fluid in your emotions, which means that whatever the situation calls for, you can align yourself with that. So if the situation calls you to be, merciful, you can be merciful. If it calls you to be cruel, you can be cruel, So like, and you're not stuck in either direction. But the reason why you incline a little bit towards one side is that one of the two extremes is always going to be more frequent in the midos hakadosh baruch hu. So for example, God more often demands mercy than cruelty, or more often demands generosity than withholding, or more often demands humility than gaiva, So the chassid will be always priming himself, even though he wants to be anchored in the middle, he'll always be slightly leaning towards one side, which is more in line with derech Hashem. I think that was what our theory was from last year. Isaac, you'll correct me if if that sounds horribly wrong. Okay. Okay. So then he says, so if you incline towards the extreme a little bit, then your malchus will be established. And what's your malchus according to the way he's learning it? Your intellectual dominance of yourself. Okay, your intellectual self-governing. Okay, so let's just figure out what that idea is. Okay, so he's saying if you want your king to rule, which is your intellect to rule over all of your faculties, so you need two things. You need Chesed and Emes, which means you need perfection of midos. But Chesed is what is going to keep your malchus going, which is always inclining towards the one extreme, which is more in line towards with God's will. How does that work? I know there's like a whole question of like how perfection of midos works in general, but I'm saying, can we get like any idea from this?
I'm still not following what you're saying. You're saying that one.
So chesed, so king is your intellect. Okay, the kingdom is the intellect's mastery over the entire body. You know, your emotions in your body. Emes is being in the middle path with all of your emotions, and chesed is inclining a little bit towards one extreme, not all the way to the extreme, but just going in that direction, because God's will, we're saying, because God's will demands one more often than the other, you know? So again, like in an example, God wants you to be merciful, but with Shaul, he had to be cruel by killing Amalek, you know?
Right.
Or God wants you to be humble, but Chazal say that like a Talmid Chacham needs to exercise some gava when the Kavod Torah is in danger. You know, he can't like let people trample over Kavod Torah. So so he's saying what's going to make your kingship last is if you are inclining a little bit in that one direction. Yeah, David.
This might be a little overly simple, but it does, at the very least, I would think of when you're acting a certain way. It's much easier to think in the way that you're acting. And so if you're constantly more often leaning toward acting a certain way and you're not, then your mind will also be able to think in the way that you're acting.
Yeah.
Instead of having like a strain of like trying to think in a way that's not what's natural to you.
Yeah. Okay, good. So let me give you an example of that. And it's not the best example in terms of the Meiri, but it's a good example in terms of the phenomenon you're talking about. I think I did an episode of the Sogju podcast on this. There's the parable of the farmer, and then there's the parable of Nachum Ish Gamzu. Okay, so the parable of the farmer is there was once a poor farmer, and he only had one son and one horse, and the people in the village felt sorry for him. And then one day his horse ran off, and the people of the village said, "Oh, such bad luck, you know, because you lost your only horse." And so the guy said, "Good, bad, it's hard to say, you know." So then a couple of days later, the horse came in from the wild, and it brought in a whole pack of wild horses. And so the people were like, "Oh, you're so lucky. Now you like tripled you quadrupled your number of horses." And the guy says, "Good, bad, it's hard to say." You know, so then a little while later, his son was trying to like train one of the new horses, the wild horses, and it threw him off and broke his leg. And now like the guy doesn't have a son to help him with all the farm duties. And the people said, "Oh, such bad luck." And he said, "Good, bad, it's hard to say." And then a couple days later, the army came in and like we're rounding up all the able-bodied young men, and like they took away all of the people's like sons, but then this guy's son they spared. And the people said, "Oh, you're so lucky." And he said, "Good, bad, it's hard to say." You know, so the moral of that story is you can't say that anything is good or bad, because you never know what the outcome is, and things that look good now can end up being bad, or vice versa. So that's a good lesson about like not giving into that emotion of just judging this as good or as bad in the moment. Okay, but then you have the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu, right? Who it's a whole long story, but basically like Nachum Ish Gamzu was known as a miracle worker. Okay, you shouldn't take this literally, right? But it was a miracle worker, and this was back in the days when the people had to like give tributes from the Jewish community to the Caesar. So they said like, and I guess it was like a risky job. So they said, "Who are we going to bring? Who's going to like take the stuff to the king?" Nachum Ish Gamzu. Okay, and he was known for saying "Gamzu Latova," right? This too is for the good, you know. So they load him up with this chest full of jewelry, or like jewels, and he goes and he stays in a hotel. And like during the night, like these robbers rob him, and they replace all the jewelry with like dirt, you know. So Nachum Ish Gamzu like discovers it in the morning, and he's like, and most people would freak out and think that the king's going to kill them. And he says, "Oh, Gamzu Latova." So then he gets to the Caesar's palace, and like they open it up, and they see that that's dirt, and the Caesar's like, "Oh, the Jews are like mocking me," you know. So Nachum Ish Gamzu says, "No, this is the dirt that Avram Avinu used to defeat the 5 kings. Is if you throw it in the air, it'll turn into arrows, and then it'll like kill all your enemies," you know. So the Caesar said, "Okay, let's try it out." So there was a city that he couldn't conquer, and he tried it out, and it worked. Okay, so he said, "I'm going to reward, Nachum Ish Gamzu." So he filled the entire thing with jewels, and Nachum Ish Gamzu went on his way. He stayed at the same hotel on the way back, and the thieves were like, "Wait, I thought that this guy got killed by the Caesar because we stole all of his money." So someone told them what happened. So they said, "Oh, he got the dirt from this inn." So they harvested a bunch of the dirt, went to the Caesar, and said, "Hey, we got more of that dirt." And the Caesar took it and tried it, and it didn't work, and then they all got killed. Okay, so the moral of the story is you should always depend on miracles. No, I'm just kidding. So the difficulty, so the moral of the story is, again, you don't take that literally, but the moral of the story is Nachum Ish Gamzu was always saying that this too is for the good. So my question was, what's the difference between the parable of the farmer and Nachum Ish Gamzu? So yeah.
Is Tova reference to migrations?
That's how the Kuzari learns Gamzu Latova in his explanation of that story. Funny, he quotes the story, but he totally dismisses. He doesn't acknowledge any of the miraculous stuff. He just says he gives a whole explanation. And he says, "Oh, that's what the idea is of Nachum Ish Gamzu." But the way I explained it was like the way David explained it, which is like this: the commonality of both stories is that you shouldn't give in to your initial evaluation of things. Things look bad and they could be good, or they look good and they could be bad. So both stories are designed to prevent you from like just immediately judging that this is going to be one way or the other. So that's the middle path, is you don't let your emotions get pulled in any one direction. Okay. But Nachum Ish Gamzu is doing more than that. He's building on that, but he is framing everything as good in order to get his mind to start seeking the good in that thing. Meaning that I always forget who said this, that fortune is when circumstance meets with preparedness. Okay, meaning that there's no such thing as luck, but if you have good circumstances that come your way and you're prepared to make use of them, that's what we mean by fortune. So Nachum Ish Gamzu is going to not give in to like, oh, I'm doomed, I'm just going to give up hope, but he's going to be always looking for the good in stuff. And that will actually cause his mind to start framing things in a way that can actually lead to a greater net good than he would have had. Whereas if you just remain neutral, so you won't be a victim of like saying, oh, I'm doomed or I'm like blessed, but you won't be like actively like trying to make your circumstances into the good. I actually have to go now because the plumber is going to get there.
Right.
But I'll you can tell me while I pack up. I just have to stop this.
There's a problem with my company.
Yeah.
It's called